The verb aller means to go. It is a verb irrégulier, however, it's an extremely important one. Just like in English, we use it primarily with places or events, such as to say, I'm going to French class or he's going to the store. We saw this briefly in first semester when we learned it as a set part of a phrase, to go, for example, to the park. We learned how to say, j'aime aller au parc. I like to go to the park. Now, you're finally going to get to learn how to conjugate the verb aller to make it be the primary verb in your sentence. We can also use the verb aller slightly more informally to mean how someone is doing. So if you remember way back in August, we learned the phrase comment ça va? How are you? You're not actually asking how are you, you're literally asking how's it going. So comment is our question word how, va is a form of the verb aller, and that ça is one of several ways to say it in French. So rather than asking how are you, you're literally asking how's it going. So here are the 6 conjugations of aller. Je vais, I go or I'm going. Tu vas, you go or you're going. Il va, he goes or he's going. Elle va, she goes or she's going. On va, one goes or one's going. Nous allons, we go or we're going. Vous allez, you go or you're going. Ils vont, they go or they're going. And elles vont, also they go or they're going. Je vais, tu vas, il, elle, on va. Nous allons, vous allez, ils, elles vont. So let's take a quick look at some of those phonetics. So remember that the letter combination AIS is always pronounced A. This is how we get je vais. This is also why je vais and tu vas, il va have a different sound. We're used to this first column all sounding the same in both our regular and our irregular verbs. We've seen things like je fais, tu fais, il fait, je joue, tu joues, il joue. Okay, however, that's not always true. And we have seen that in a couple of our other irregulars where they're totally different, like je suis, tu es. However, in this case, this one can be a little bit tricky because we look at them and we see that they look fairly similar. However, because AIS is a letter combination and AS and A or not, we still have them pronounced differently. Je vais, tu vas, and il va. Also, you can hear the liaison in the nous and the vous form. Remember, liaison is pronounced when a word ends in an S and is followed by a word that begins with a vowel. We smash it together and turn that S into a Z sound. It's nous and allons, but when we put them next to each other, it's nous allons. Same thing with vous and allez. Put them together, we get vous allez. So now you know our 4 quote-unquote main irregulars: avoir, être, faire, and aller. Sometimes these are said to be the only irregular verbs in the entire French language, which is not technically true. There are a fairly large number of verbs which count as irregular. However, these are considered the 4 main ones for 2 reasons. 1, they're the 4 most common verbs in the entire French language. In fact, these are usually the 4 most common verbs in most languages. If you think about how often you use forms of have, be, do, make, and go, you use them pretty much every single day multiple times. However, these are also the so-called most irregular conjugations, where each and every one of those 6 forms really have very, very little, if anything, to do with each other. All of our other irregular verbs that we're going to be looking at from now on, they might technically be irregular, But it tends to be small spelling changes. So it'll be things like, oh, you find the stem and then you change the last letter of the stem into a different letter. You're essentially just adding an extra step onto a regular pattern. Versus these four are truly irregular, where je vais has absolutely nothing to do with nous allons.